Hello friends. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. That morning marked the third straight day of driving through a part of the country that felt deliberately forgotten. The highways were paved and maintained, but everything beyond them faded into long stretches of land where towns seemed optional rather than permanent. Places you passed through instead of arrived at. The trip was supposed to be a reset. After months of juggling work deadlines, school schedules, and the kind of stress that never quite lets your shoulders relax, we decided to take the kids and disappear for a while. No flights, no strict itineraries. Just a long road trip across several states, staying wherever the day ended. By that point, chain hotels had started to blur together. Same carpets, same fluorescent lighting, same sense of never truly sleeping. So when we saw a listing for a small roadside lodge, cheap, quiet, and advertised as old-fashioned, it felt like a harmless change of pace. Something rustic. Something memorable. My partner, Sarah, scrolled through the reviews while I drove. Nothing screamed danger. No horror stories, no warnings. Just a handful of short comments mentioning clean rooms, hot showers, and peaceful nights. The kind of place people didn't bother writing much about because nothing happened there. The kids were restless but excited, turning the drive into a game by counting mile markers and guessing how much longer until we stopped. When the GPS told us to turn off the highway onto a narrow gravel road, I remember slowing down and feeling the silence immediately press in. Fields stretched endlessly on both sides, tall grass bending lazily in the breeze. No houses, no fences, no signs of recent activity. The sound of the tires crunching over gravel felt unnaturally loud, like we were announcing our presence to something that preferred not to be disturbed. The lodge came into view slowly, sitting back from the road, as if it were hiding rather than welcoming. The sign out front was sun-faded, the lettering barely readable. Windows looked dull, clouded with grime that hadn't been wiped away in years. Paint peeled from the walls in long strips, exposing older layers beneath, like the building had been trying to shed its own skin. The parking lot was cracked and uneven, weeds pushing up wherever they could. No cars, not near the rooms, not near the office, not even one. For mid-afternoon, that felt wrong. As we pulled in, a single man stepped out of the office. He stood too straight, like posture was something he practiced. His clothes didn't look dirty exactly, but they looked slept in, creased in strange places, worn without care. When he spoke, his voice was polite but flat, like someone repeating lines they'd memorized a long time ago. He didn't offer small talk, didn't ask where we were coming from or where we were headed. His answers were short, clipped, and his eyes never quite met ours. They drifted past us, scanning the lot, the road, the fields beyond, as if he expected someone else to appear. The air smelled faintly of damp wood and something sour underneath it, something I couldn't immediately identify. Inside the office, only half the lights were on. A dusty ceiling fan hummed loudly, but barely moved the air. The counter was clean in the way something gets wiped down without being truly cleaned. Papers were stacked neatly, but old. A bell sat near the register, its metal dulled with age. We exchanged a look, the kind couples share without words. The look that says, "You feel it too. But let's not alarm the kids." The room we were given wasn't dirty. That almost made it worse. Everything was functional, but nothing felt cared for. Heavy curtains blocked most of the daylight, making the space feel smaller and more closed in than it should have been. The carpet had been vacuumed recently, but stains remained, faint outlines that no amount of cleaning could erase. While unpacking, I noticed a sound coming from somewhere behind the building. It wasn't constant. A low, irregular thudding, like something heavy being shifted, dragged, then paused, then dragged again. Not mechanical, not rhythmic, just deliberate. Sarah tried to brush it off, suggesting maybe maintenance equipment or an old generator. I nodded, but the sound didn't match either explanation. A few minutes later, Sarah went to grab snacks from the vending machines near the side exit. She came back with an uneasy expression and told me the door wouldn't open. Locked. Not jammed. Not stuck. Locked from the outside. That didn't make sense. It was clearly marked as a guest exit. We tried another door near the back stairwell. Same thing. Secured tight, as if someone had gone out of their way to make sure it couldn't be opened from inside. That was when the discomfort shifted into something heavier. I stepped outside to get some air, telling Sarah I just needed to stretch my legs. The sun was still high, the heat pressing down. But the moment I rounded the side of the building, I felt my skin tighten. Behind a dumpster, partially hidden from view, were several items that didn't belong there. A worn backpack, a single sneaker, and a cracked phone case, split clean down the middle. They weren't arranged like trash. They were tucked away, pushed out of sight, like someone didn't want them found, but hadn't had time to get rid of them properly. The thudding noise started again, closer this time. I felt a prickling sensation crawl up my arms despite the heat. That deep, instinctive warning that doesn't come with words, just urgency. We didn't announce our decision. It happened quietly, all at once. Sarah told the kids to put their shoes back on and grab their bags without asking questions. Her voice was calm, controlled, but I could hear the strain beneath it. I walked to the office to return the key. The man looked surprised when I said we were leaving early. Not concerned, not curious, annoyed. He didn't ask why. He just took the key and slid it into a drawer already full of them. Too full. Outside, the sky was beginning to shift toward evening. Shadows stretched long across the empty lot, making the lodge look even more isolated than before. As we pulled away, I checked the rearview mirror more than necessary, half expecting headlights to appear behind us. None did. But the relief didn't come until the lodge disappeared entirely from view. We didn't report the place, mostly because we didn't know what to say without sounding paranoid. There was no crime, no confrontation, just instincts and fragments. Still, I think about those hidden belongings more than anything else. They weren't weathered enough to have been there long, and they didn't belong together, which meant they belonged to more than one person. We kept driving until the road finally led us back to something familiar. Traffic. Headlights passing often enough to remind you that other people still existed. No one spoke for a long time. Not even the kids. That silence said more than questions ever could. The radio played softly, a talk show fading in and out as hills interfered with the signal. Every now and then, Sarah would glance at me like she wanted to say something, then stop herself. My thoughts kept circling back to the locked exits. Not broken. Not neglected. Secured. That detail stayed with me more than the noise or the empty lot. It suggested planning. By the time the sun dipped lower, the tension inside the car felt heavier than the luggage in the trunk. We pulled into a small gas station just before dusk, the kind with buzzing lights, stained concrete, and a single cashier behind thick glass. While filling up, I noticed my hands still weren't steady. Sarah took the kids inside, and I stayed by the pump, scanning the lot out of habit. A family minivan rolled in, then a pickup truck. The normalcy of it all felt unreal, like stepping back into the world after being underwater too long. Inside, Sarah told me one of the kids had asked why the doors at the lodge were locked. She'd brushed it off, blaming the building's age. The lie sounded thin, even to her. We agreed not to stop anywhere isolated again that day, no matter how tired we got. As night settled in, the image of those items behind the building replayed in my mind. I thought briefly about whether we'd overreacted, whether curiosity should have pushed us to stay. But the idea of returning after dark made my chest tighten. Instincts exist for a reason. We reached a busier town late that evening and checked into a chain hotel that smelled like bleach and burnt coffee. The relief was immediate and embarrassing, like we'd escaped something without ever fully understanding what it was. The kids relaxed instantly, laughing at the TV and tearing into snacks from a vending machine that actually worked. Sarah and I stayed up longer than usual, replaying the day in quiet voices, making sure our memories matched. Nothing else happened that night. No calls, no strange encounters. Just sleep that came hard, but stayed. Years later, I still can't explain what that lodge was really used for. All I know is that leaving when we did felt like closing a door we were never meant to open. A few days after we got home, curiosity got the better of me. I looked the lodge up again. The listing was still there. Same photos, same cheerful descriptions. I scrolled through the reviews and noticed something unsettling. Gaps. Weeks with nothing. Then a sudden, overly positive comment that felt generic, like it had been written to fill space rather than describe an actual stay. I left a careful review of our own. No accusations, just facts. The lack of guests, the locked exits, the belongings behind the building. Hitting post felt heavier than it should have. A week later, the listing was gone. No archived page, no explanation. Just gone. The building still exists on satellite view. You can see it sitting there, unchanged. But there's no sign it ever welcomed travelers. That disappearance was the closest thing to an answer we ever got. And honestly, not knowing feels like the safest outcome. I've driven thousands of miles across the United States in my life. City traffic, desert highways, snow-covered mountain passes. None of it ever bothered me. Roads were predictable. Signs told you where you were. Lights told you who was coming. That sense of order is something you don't realize you depend on until one night proves how fragile it really is. This happened in March 2024 on a stretch of Interstate 10 between Texas and Louisiana. It was supposed to be a simple overnight drive, a bachelor weekend, a memory we'd laugh about years later. Instead, it became the reason I no longer trust flashing lights in my rearview mirror. There were 5 of us packed into Aaron's aging dark green Chevy Tahoe. Aaron was driving. He'd always been the responsible one, the guy who kept receipts, checked tire pressure, and refused to speed even when everyone else begged him to. Riding shotgun was Cole, calm and soft-spoken, scrolling through playlists and handling navigation. In the back seats were Nate, Jordan, and me. I'm Daniel, 27 years old at the time, working long hours at a logistics firm in Houston. This trip felt like oxygen after months of deadlines and fluorescent lighting. We left Austin just after 8 p.m., planning to reach New Orleans by sunrise. The first few hours were exactly what you'd expect. Music loud enough to vibrate the windows. Jokes that made no sense to anyone outside the car. Energy buzzing through the cabin. Then Louisiana swallowed the road. The change was subtle at first. Billboards disappeared. Exit signs grew farther apart. The highway narrowed visually, even if the lanes stayed the same width. Trees pressed in from both sides, tall, dark, unbroken walls of pine and swamp oak. Traffic thinned until we were often the only vehicle in sight. By the time we crossed fully into Louisiana, it felt like we'd slipped off the map. Aaron had cruise control set at 71. No one wanted a ticket in the middle of nowhere. Nate had fallen asleep with his hood pulled over his face. Jordan was half watching videos on his phone with the brightness turned low. That's when Aaron straightened suddenly in his seat. "Does anyone else see that?" he asked. I looked up from my phone and glanced into the rearview mirror. Red and blue lights. They appeared suddenly, blooming in the darkness behind us, like something waking up. My first instinct was irritation. We weren't speeding. We hadn't swerved. Nothing felt off. Until it did. Aaron eased onto the shoulder. Gravel crunched beneath the tires. The flashing lights washed the trees in alternating color, making the forest seem alive, twitching in red and blue pulses. The SUV that stopped behind us was black, or maybe dark navy. It was hard to tell under the lights. What stood out immediately was what wasn't there. No department markings, no insignia, no unit number. Even the light bar looked wrong, slightly crooked, as if it had been bolted on by hand. "That's weird," Jordan muttered. We sat in silence as the driver's door opened. The man stepped out quickly. Too quickly. Police usually approach cautiously, deliberately. This man moved with purpose, almost excitement. He carried a flashlight but kept it pointed at the pavement, not the vehicle. Aaron rolled the window halfway down. The man leaned in closer than anyone wearing a badge ever should. I could smell stale coffee and something sour underneath. He wore black from head to toe. No badge, no nameplate, no patches. Just plain black fabric and a utility belt with shapes I couldn't identify in the dark. His face was thin, almost hollow. Deep-set eyes caught the glow of his own lights. His beard looked uneven, like he hadn't bothered to groom it in weeks. He smiled. It was the kind of smile that makes your shoulders tense without you realizing why. "Evening," he said casually. "License and registration." Aaron handed them over. The man didn't look at them. He barely glanced down before his eyes moved back inside the vehicle, scanning each of us slowly. "Where you boys headed tonight?" he asked. "New Orleans," Cole answered. "For how long?" "Weekend." The man nodded slowly, like he was filing information away. "Anyone expecting you?" he asked. "Friends? Family?" I felt my stomach tighten. "That normal?" Jordan whispered. The man's flashlight shifted, landing directly on me. "You live with anyone?" he asked. "Yeah," I said cautiously. "Roommate know where you are?" "Yes." He turned the light to Jordan. "You got a girlfriend?" Jordan hesitated. "Yeah." "She know your route tonight?" The question sat in the air, heavy and wrong. Aaron finally spoke. "Officer, can I ask why we were pulled over?" The man chuckled softly. "I'll get to that." He stepped back and walked around the front of the Tahoe, dragging his fingers slowly across the hood as if feeling for imperfections. The sound made my skin crawl. He stopped at the passenger side and knocked on the window. Cole lowered it just a few inches. "I need you to step out of the vehicle," the man said lightly. "Just a quick conversation." Cole froze. "Why?" he asked. The smile flickered, just for a second, replaced by something sharp and irritated. "Standard procedure." That was the moment Aaron reached for his phone. "Hey," Aaron said calmly, raising it slightly. "I'm just going to call this in and verify the stop." Everything changed. The man straightened instantly. The friendliness vanished. His jaw tightened, eyes darting toward his SUV. "That won't be necessary," he snapped. "You're free to go." He tossed Aaron's license and registration onto the gravel and walked quickly back toward his vehicle. "Go," Nate said quietly from the back seat. Aaron didn't hesitate. He pulled onto the highway, accelerating faster than I'd ever seen him drive. I twisted around to look out the rear window. The flashing lights shut off. Not dimmed, not slowed. Just gone. The SUV sat in darkness for a moment, then turned across the median without headlights and disappeared in the opposite direction. No police vehicle does that. We drove in silence for miles, adrenaline buzzing through the cabin. Every set of headlights made my chest tighten. Every dark exit looked like a trap. After nearly 40 minutes, we spotted a brightly lit gas station. We pulled in immediately. Under the fluorescent lights sat a real Louisiana State Trooper vehicle, fully marked, parked near the building. We approached him together, voices overlapping as we explained what happened. His expression shifted as we spoke. By the time Aaron finished, the trooper was no longer relaxed. "There were no authorized units operating in that area tonight," he said. The words felt like ice. We followed him to a nearby station and spent hours giving statements. A detective listened carefully, asking for details. The crooked light bar, the questions, the man's hands, dirty nails, a faded wrist tattoo I hadn't been able to read. When we were done, she thanked us quietly. "Our description matches other reports," she said. "Same stretch of highway." She didn't elaborate. We reached New Orleans by sunrise, but the trip never recovered. Laughter felt forced. Silence crept in whenever night fell. Weeks later, I still check my mirrors when I drive alone. And every time I see flashing lights on a dark highway, I remember how close we came to stepping out of that car. It was just after 2 a.m. when I realized we shouldn't have stopped. At that point, Mason and I had already been on the road for nearly 6 hours, driving east from Denver, Colorado, toward Kansas City, Missouri. The plan was simple: split the drive, power through the night, and arrive by late morning. I needed to see my father. He'd been admitted to the hospital 2 days earlier, and every mile between me and him felt heavier than the last. Mason had worked a full shift at the distribution warehouse before picking me up. I hadn't slept either. My head was loud with worry, worst-case scenarios looping endlessly. 2 exhausted people had no business pushing that hard, but we convinced ourselves we could manage. That's what tired people always do. Mason was driving when the car drifted just slightly toward the shoulder. Not enough to be dramatic, but enough. "Pull over," I said. "Now." He didn't argue. We both knew how dangerous that moment had been. The last proper rest stop was miles behind us, but ahead, barely visible in the headlights, was a narrow gravel turnoff cutting into the trees. No sign, no lights, just a raw patch of ground, like someone had scraped it open and forgotten about it. Mason eased the car in and parked near the edge where gravel met grass. We agreed on 2 hours, 3 max. The air outside was colder than expected. September cold, the kind that slips under your clothes and settles directly against your skin. Mason walked toward the tree line to relieve himself while I paced near the car, stretching stiff legs, breathing deep. Our headlights were still on. That's when I saw the ground. About 20 feet ahead of us, the gravel looked wrong. Deep tire marks gouged through it, fresh, sharp, aggressive. Not casual parking marks. These were made by someone who hit the gas hard. Beside them, the dirt and grass were disturbed, churned into uneven mounds. Looked like a struggle. I called Mason over. He zipped up, walked back, and stared at the ground with me. He pulled out his phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam was weak, but it didn't need to be stronger. The edges of the tire tracks were crisp. No wind erosion. No settling. Recent, Mason muttered. We followed the tracks toward the trees. That's when the smell hit us. Faint. Sweet. Chemical. Gasoline. Mixed with something else. We both stopped moving. I took the phone and stepped closer. Half hidden in tall grass was a disposable glove, pale blue, inside out like someone had torn it off in a hurry. Another lay nearby, latex or nitrile. Doctors wore gloves like this. So did people who didn't want to leave fingerprints. My stomach tightened. About 5 feet farther in, I found a jacket. Dark canvas, heavy, bunched unnaturally like it had been thrown. When I swept the flashlight across it, my breath caught. The back was soaked. Not a splash, not a smear. Soaked. Dark, wet, heavy blood. And behind it, pressed deep into the grass, drag marks. Wide ones. Human-wide. Someone had been pulled from this spot into the woods. I shut off the flashlight. "We're leaving," I said. Now. We didn't run. Not yet. We walked fast, forcing calm, every sound amplified in the dark. Gravel crunching. Breath too loud. Wind whispering through leaves like it knew something we didn't. We were 15 feet from the car when Mason stopped. Hard. He grabbed my shoulder and pointed. Across the road, opposite tree line, there was a light. Dim, yellowish, stationary. Not a vehicle, not moving, just aimed. At us. I couldn't judge the distance. The trees distorted everything. 50 feet? 100? We stood frozen. The light stayed on. Then it shut off. Instantly. The darkness afterward felt thicker, heavier, like something had stepped closer without moving. Mason whispered my name. We ran. I yanked open the passenger door. My hands shook so badly I fumbled the seatbelt. Mason dropped his keys, picked them up, dropped them again. The engine finally turned. He threw it into reverse. Gravel exploded behind us. I twisted in my seat, and I saw it. A figure. Standing exactly where the light had been. No features. Just a shape darker than the darkness behind it. Watching. Mason saw it too. He swore and slammed the gas. We hit the highway too fast, fishtailing before the tires caught. Neither of us looked back again. We drove in silence for 10 miles, 20, 30. Every mirror check made my heart spike. Every shadow looked like headlights forming. Finally, a gas station appeared. Bright, buzzing, alive. We pulled in and just sat there, engine running. Mason asked what we should do. "Call the police," I said. And we did. Explaining was harder than I expected. No exact location, no mile marker. Just somewhere between stretches of identical road and endless trees. The dispatcher paused when I mentioned the light. The figure. Units were sent. We continued on to Kansas City. I stayed at the hospital with my father. Barely slept. Every sound made my heart race. 4 days later, a detective called. They'd found the turnoff. They found evidence. Human blood. More, deeper in the woods. No suspect. No arrests. That was 6 months ago. I still check the news. Still think about that light. Turning off. knowing we saw something. And sometimes, late at night, I wonder if whoever stood there still remembers us too. I had been married to Ruth for 42 years when we finally stopped saying one day and actually packed our lives into a vehicle. For decades, we talked about traveling the country the slow way. Back roads, diners with cracked vinyl booths, desert sunsets and mountain air. But life always came first. Jobs, kids, bills, responsibilities that stacked up year after year until the idea of leaving felt impossible. Then, one quiet winter morning, sitting at our kitchen table in Harrisonville, Missouri, Ruth folded the newspaper, looked at me over her reading glasses and said, "If we don't go now, we never will." She had retired from teaching the year before. I'd wrapped up my final year working maintenance for the city. Our grandson was about to turn 6 in Arizona, and our daughter had been begging us to visit properly, not just fly in, rush a weekend, and leave. So we bought a used 2013 Winnebago Sightseer. Nothing fancy. Faded paint. A few soft spots in the roof we patched ourselves, but it ran clean, and the engine sounded strong. We spent weeks getting it ready. I checked hoses and belts. Ruth replaced curtains, stocked cabinets, labeled drawers like she used to do for her classrooms. We planned routes on paper maps, real ones, circling scenic highways and marking fuel stops with a red pen. We left just after Labor Day. Early fall, the kind of weather where mornings are crisp and afternoons still warm. The world smelled like dry grass and distant rain. The first days were perfect. We camped outside Lincoln, Nebraska, grilled bratwursts, watched the sky fade from gold to deep purple. I remember lying awake that night, listening to wind through the grass and thinking, this is what freedom feels like. By day 3, we crossed into western Colorado, where the land opens up and the roads stretch thin and lonely. That's when things began to feel wrong. Cell service disappeared somewhere after noon. Not surprising, but unsettling. Ruth tried sending photos, laughed when they wouldn't go through, and said she'd upload them later. We stopped for gas near a place called Red Hollow, barely a town. 2 pumps, a single building with dusty windows, no other cars. A man stepped out to help us pump gas. Tall, sunburned, late 50s maybe. His name tag read Harlan. He asked where we were headed. When I told him Arizona, he nodded slowly, eyes lingering on the camper. "You taking Route 117 through the canyon?" he asked. I said yes. He frowned. Not dramatic, just enough to notice. "That road's been trouble lately," he said. "Breakdowns, folks getting stranded." He suggested a longer route, added time, but busier roads. I thanked him and said we'd stick to the plan. As we drove off, I checked my mirror. Harlan was still standing there, watching us leave. Ruth said I was imagining things. I wanted to believe her. Route 117 cut through red stone cliffs and narrow passes where the sky felt far away. The walls rose high on both sides, layered with shadows that shifted as the sun moved. We hadn't seen another vehicle in over an hour when I noticed a white pickup truck behind us. At first, it stayed distant, then closer, then steady. It didn't pass, didn't fall back, just stayed there. Ruth noticed too. She stopped taking photos. I suggested pulling into an overlook to let it pass. When we did, the truck slowed. The driver stared as he rolled by, sunglasses on, head shaved, beard thick and dark. His lips moved slightly, like he was whispering something. Ruth grabbed my arm. We waited. The truck disappeared ahead. I wanted to turn around. go back, find a motel. But daylight was fading, and the map showed a town ahead. Stone Creek. 40 minutes. We pressed on. The road narrowed again. Then came the bend, and there it was. The white pickup sat sideways across the road, blocking everything. A man stood in front of it. Then 2 more stepped out of the trees. I slammed the brakes. Before I could reverse, an engine roared behind us. A rusted sedan blocked our retreat. We were trapped. The man in front approached slowly. Calm. Confident. He told us this could be easy or hard. Said they only wanted the camper and our cash. Said they'd let us walk away. I didn't believe him. Neither did Ruth. She squeezed my hand once. Hard. I made a decision that still echoes in my bones. I floored the gas, in reverse. Metal screamed. The car behind us crumpled. The camper lurched. I shifted into drive and punched it forward through a narrow gap. Something hit the side, metal on metal. We broke free. Barely. The camper shook violently. Steering pulled. Smoke rose from the hood. I drove until the engine screamed in protest. Then it died. We hid in the forest for hours. We heard engines, voices, lights sweeping through trees. At some point, flames lit the sky where our camper had been. They burned it. Morning came like mercy. We walked for hours until a truck driver found us. The police later caught one man. They said others vanished. We never took another road trip. Some roads don't want you. And once they decide that, they don't forget. I used to think exhaustion was just part of being young. Something you pushed through with loud music, cheap confidence, and the belief that bad things only happen to other people. Back then, we thought sleep was optional, and consequences were negotiable. That belief nearly killed all of us. It was March 2023, the start of spring break, when 5 of us packed ourselves into Brandon's dad's old Chevy Suburban and pointed it south toward Austin, Texas. We had graduated the year before, class of 2022, and this trip felt like our last reckless exhale before life scattered us in different directions. I was riding shotgun. Brandon was driving. He always drove. He liked the control. His girlfriend Tessa sat behind me, headphones half on, half off. Miles and Renee were wedged in the back with backpacks, jackets, and a cooler that barely shut. We left Wichita Falls just after sunset. The plan was simple. Drive straight through the night, avoid motel costs, crash at a friend's place in Austin by morning. It sounded reasonable when we said it out loud. It always does, before fatigue sets in. The weather started turning ugly not long after we crossed deeper into rural Texas. Rain at first, then wind, then rain so heavy it felt like gravel being thrown against the windshield. Brandon laughed it off. "I've driven through worse," he said, turning the radio up. Someone passed a bottle from the back seat. I took a sip, burned my throat, made me feel warmer, dumber. Outside, the storm swallowed the road. By midnight, the highway felt like it no longer belonged to us. No streetlights, no towns, just black land stretching endlessly beyond the guardrails. I watched the windshield wipers struggle, their rhythm uneven, fighting a losing battle. Brandon had been driving for nearly 5 hours straight. I noticed the signs before anyone else did. The blinking, the jaw stretching, the way he rolled the window down despite the cold, letting rain spray inside just to stay awake. Tessa suggested stopping. "Just 20 minutes, she said. "Power nap." Brandon shook his head. "Stopping now would be stupid." Miles laughed from the back and said something about Brandon being built different. That was when Brandon grabbed the bottle and took a long drink, just to prove he could. I should have stopped him. I should have said something. Instead, I stared out at the darkness and told myself we were fine. Around 1:30 a.m., the car went quiet. Renee fell asleep against the window. Tessa drifted off, jacket pulled up to her chin. Miles scrolled on his phone, the blue glow turning his face hollow and unreal. The heater hummed. The rain became white noise. That's how sleep sneaks up on you. Not like a switch flipping, but like gravity slowly increasing. I pinched my arm to stay alert, checked on Brandon. His eyes fluttered too often. His head dipped, then snapped back up. I offered to drive. He said no. The GPS said 2 hours, 18 minutes remaining. I remember that number clearly, because I kept wondering if it was a lie. The curve came without warning. 1 second, we were on a straight stretch of highway. The next, the road bent sharply left. A warning sign might have been there, but the rain erased everything. Brandon yanked the wheel. The Suburban fishtailed. Tires screamed. Tessa screamed. Time broke apart. I remember individual moments instead of a sequence, like photographs scattered on the ground. Rain suspended in headlights. The steering wheel jerking violently. Miles shouting something I couldn't hear. We slammed into the guardrail. Metal shrieked. Then the world dropped. That weightless, stomach-lurching sensation as the vehicle left the road entirely. We rolled. Glass exploded. The ceiling became the floor. Pain arrived everywhere at once. When the motion stopped, we were upside down in a ditch. The engine was still running. The headlights illuminated nothing but mud, broken branches, and rain pouring down like punishment. I hung from my seatbelt, blood dripping onto what used to be the ceiling. For several seconds, there was only ringing in my ears. Then I heard crying. Not screaming, crying. Tessa. Soft, broken sounds like she couldn't get air. I called Brandon's name. No answer. He was slumped forward, seatbelt holding him in place, arms hanging unnaturally. Blood covered his face. Too much blood. I couldn't tell where it was coming from. My seatbelt jammed. I fumbled with it, hands shaking, panic tightening my chest. When it finally released, I dropped onto shattered glass and plastic. Pain ripped through my shoulder, white-hot, nauseating. I crawled toward Brandon. The front of the Suburban was crushed inward. The steering wheel pressed into his chest at a terrible angle. I slapped his cheek, said his name over and over. He didn't wake up, but he was breathing. Shallow, uneven. Behind me, I heard Miles groaning, Renee calling for help. Tessa went silent. That silence scared me more than screaming. Rain soaked everything. The car smelled like blood, gasoline, and wet earth. Miles managed to kick out a rear window. Glass fell outward into the mud. He dragged himself out, screaming curses, legs refusing to work properly. Renee followed, shaking, yelling into the darkness. I turned back to Tessa. Her arm was bent wrong, not broken looking, wrong looking. The bone pressed against the skin like it wanted out. She was conscious, but her eyes were empty, distant, as if her mind had retreated somewhere safe. I stayed with Brandon and Tessa, talking, begging, saying anything. Stories from college, jokes that weren't funny, promises I couldn't keep. My phone was destroyed. Miles's phone was gone. Somehow, Renee still had hers. She called 911, couldn't tell them where we were. No mile marker, no town, just a ditch and a highway, and please hurry. Minutes stretched into something unrecognizable. Rain soaked us. Tessa started shivering violently. Shock. Brandon's breathing grew weaker. I counted each breath like a prayer. The sirens came 47 minutes later. I know because Renee's phone showed the call duration. 47 minutes of waiting to see who would die. The paramedics had to lower themselves into the ditch. They stabilized Brandon, loaded Tessa, pulled Miles and Renee out. I refused to leave until everyone else was gone. Stood there shaking, injured, watching my friends carried away one by one. The hospital blurred together. White lights, antiseptic, pain. They reset my shoulder without warning. I screamed. 13 stitches in my forehead. Concussion. Cracked ribs. I was the lucky one. Miles needed surgery on both knees. Tessa lost full movement in her arm. Renee wore a neck brace for weeks. Brandon was in a coma for 4 days. When he woke up, he remembered none of it. I remembered everything. It's been almost 2 years. I still can't drive at night. I still wake up at 1:47 a.m. Still feel like I'm upside down, waiting for help that might never come. We saved money by not stopping, and it cost us everything else. If you're driving through the night and you feel tired, stop. Get the motel. Because confidence won't save you, and the road doesn't care how young you are. My wife Hannah had been asleep for nearly an hour when the feeling hit me. That quiet, crawling sensation at the base of your spine that tells you something is wrong, long before your brain can explain why. We were driving south from Eugene, Oregon, toward Fresno, California, heading to her cousin's wedding. It was mid-September, one of those rare stretches where the West Coast feels balanced. Warm sunlight without the heat, blue skies without smoke, long open highways that seem to invite you forward. We decided to do the drive in one shot. Hotels were expensive, time was tight, and honestly, we missed road trips. Hannah worked rotating shifts as a respiratory therapist. I ran my own electrical contracting business. Most days, we passed each other like ships in the night. This drive felt like a return to something simpler. We left before dawn in our Subaru Outback, thermos full of coffee, cooler packed with sandwiches, playlists downloaded in case service dropped. By the time the sun rose, Oregon's green forests were behind us, fading into Northern California's dry hills and golden fields. Hannah slept with her head against the passenger window, one hand tucked under her chin, the other resting loosely on my leg. I drove with the window cracked, listening to a podcast I barely registered, enjoying the illusion that the world was calm. For the first 6 hours, nothing happened. No arguments, no delays, just miles disappearing under our tires. That changed somewhere south of Red Bluff. The land flattened out, trees thinned, gas stations grew scarce. The highway felt exposed, too wide, too empty, the sky stretching endlessly overhead. That's when I saw him. A silver pickup truck sat on the shoulder, hood raised. Beside it stood a man waving one arm slowly, almost lazily, as if conserving energy. He didn't look frantic, didn't look angry, just patient. I eased off the accelerator. Hannah stirred. "What's up?" she mumbled. "Guy on the shoulder," I said. "Looks stuck." She squinted toward the windshield, waking up fully. "Cell service?" she asked. I checked my phone. 2 bars. "Yeah." The man looked ordinary enough. Jeans, a faded flannel shirt, baseball cap pulled low, gray creeping into his beard. Mid-40s maybe. His truck had California plates, dust-coated, but intact. I pulled over about 40 feet ahead of him. Broad daylight. Open highway. 2 of us. 1 of him. That's what I told myself. When I rolled the window down, he approached with a relieved smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Appreciate you stopping," he said. "Fuel pump gave out. Been here almost 2 hours." His voice was calm, friendly, slightly worn, like someone who'd spent years yelling over engines or wind. He introduced himself as Darren, said he was headed toward Modesto to see his kid, said he'd already called for help, but nobody came. Asked if we could give him a ride to the next town, someplace with a mechanic. Hannah looked at me. That look married couples have. No words, just shared calculation. Daylight. Public highway. Phone signal. I told him he could ride in the back. He thanked us too much, over and over. Grabbed a black duffel bag from beside his truck and slid into the back seat behind Hannah. As I merged back onto the highway, I caught his reflection in the rearview mirror. He wasn't looking at the road. He was looking at the GPS on my dashboard. For the first 15 minutes, everything felt normal. Darren made small talk, asked where we were going, commented on the weather, mentioned he used to work construction until his back went bad. Hannah, ever polite, asked about his kid. He answered, but vaguely. College-aged, something with computers. Lived down south somewhere. I didn't think much of it at the time, but he kept glancing forward, watching the route, counting exits. When he asked how far to the next town, I told him about 12 miles. He nodded. Then he went quiet. The silence grew heavy. Not comfortable. Not natural. When the exit for a small place called Anderson appeared, I signaled. Darren leaned forward. "Don't take that one," he said. I glanced at Hannah. "Why?" I asked. "Nothing open there," he replied quickly. "Better town ahead." Something in his voice had changed. Less friendly, more certain. I missed the exit. Hannah squeezed my knee, lightly at first. The next 20 minutes dragged. Darren started giving directions I hadn't asked for, telling me which lane to stay in, pointing out signs I could already see. When I mentioned a rest stop ahead, he dismissed it. Said it was overpriced. Said we should keep moving. Hannah offered him water. He didn't look at her when he refused. That's when I noticed his right hand resting inside the duffel bag, not gripping. Waiting. My chest tightened. I told him we needed gas. He leaned forward again, close enough that I could smell stale smoke and something metallic. "You've got plenty," he said. "Trust me." Not a suggestion, a statement. Hannah's hand tightened on my leg. The highway felt suddenly empty. No cars ahead, none behind. Just us, the road, and a stranger who no longer seemed interested in getting out. He started talking about his past, casually. Mentioned time inside, mentioned mistakes. Said people judge too fast. "They don't give you room to breathe," he said, staring straight ahead. "Sometimes you just need folks to help you without asking questions." He smiled in the mirror. I saw teeth. Then, red and blue lights in the distance. A checkpoint. Relief hit me so hard I almost laughed. Darren cursed. "Take the next exit," he hissed. The GPS showed a rural route leading into farmland. No towns, no services. Hannah spoke before I could. "Engine temps spiking," she said loudly. "We have to pull over." I understood immediately. I hit the hazards and slowed, stopping just short of the checkpoint. For 3 seconds, no one moved. Then Darren opened the door. He walked away from the road. Didn't run until he reached the trees. The officer told us later he'd robbed a gas station 2 counties north. We'd been driving with him for over an hour. We never picked up hitchhikers again. We left Fort Collins, Colorado, on a gray Thursday afternoon in late November. The kind of day where the sky looks heavy, like it's thinking about snow, but hasn't committed yet. Thanksgiving week traffic was already building, but we were trying to stay ahead of it by leaving early. My wife, Marla, was sitting beside me in the passenger seat, legs tucked up under her oversized fleece blanket, scrolling through a checklist on her phone. She was the organized one, always had been. The kind of person who printed hotel confirmations, even though everything was digital now. We were driving south toward Las Cruces, New Mexico, where her older brother lived with his family. It had become our tradition after we got married. Skip the chaos of airports, take the long drive, talk, listen to podcasts, and pretend life wasn't moving so fast. I worked maintenance at a distribution center just outside town. Clocked out early that day, hands still smelling faintly of oil and metal. Marla picked me up right at the gate so we wouldn't waste daylight. She smiled when she saw me, that same smile that had somehow survived 7 years of marriage, bad fights, tight money, and long nights. She wore my old thermal hoodie, sleeves too long for her arms, hair twisted into a loose knot that never stayed neat for more than an hour. I remember thinking, really noticing, how comfortable she looked, how safe everything felt. We planned to drive through the night and arrive by morning. That plan didn't survive. By the time we crossed into New Mexico, the sun had fully disappeared. The land opened up into something vast and empty. Long stretches of highway with nothing but scrub, distant mesas, and the occasional gas station glowing like a mirage before vanishing behind us. Marla dozed off somewhere south of Trinidad, her head leaning against the window, breath slow and steady. I turned the radio low. Static-filled country songs faded in and out as we passed through dead zones. The temperature dropped fast, low 30s, maybe colder. I could feel the chill creeping in through the doors of our old Ford Explorer, a vehicle that had more miles than sense, but had never failed us before. Around 11:40 p.m., somewhere between Raton Pass and Las Vegas, New Mexico, I noticed headlights in my rearview mirror. They were coming up fast. At first, I thought it was just someone in a hurry, but then they stayed close. Too close. Riding my bumper, lights flaring in my mirrors. A dark pickup truck pulled alongside us. The driver leaned out his window, honking, waving his arm wildly. He pointed toward the back of our SUV, then made a sharp, slicing motion with his hand. My stomach tightened. I slowed slightly and cracked my window. Cold air slammed into the cabin. I couldn't hear what he was yelling, but he kept pointing, insisting. Marla stirred awake, confused. "What's happening?" she asked, voice thick with sleep. "Guy says something's wrong with the car," I replied, trying to sound calm. "Maybe the tire." The truck pulled ahead, hazards flashing, and slowed to a stop on the wide shoulder. I hesitated. That moment still haunts me. Something deep in my gut told me to keep driving, to ignore him. But logic pushed back. If something really was wrong, we couldn't afford to lose a tire out here. I pulled over. Our headlights lit up the back of his truck, a mud-covered black pickup with Arizona plates. The man stepped out. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a faded work jacket and a baseball cap pulled low. His movements were slow, deliberate. I told Marla to lock the doors and stay inside. She nodded. I stepped out, phone flashlight already on. The cold hit me like a slap. He met me between the vehicles, smiling at first. Said he'd seen sparks near our rear tire. Said he didn't want us getting stranded. I thanked him and crouched to check. The tire looked fine. No damage, no loose metal. Nothing. When I stood up, he was closer. Too close. The smile was gone. His face looked empty, like someone had turned off whatever made him human. I asked which tire he'd seen. He didn't answer, just tilted his head. The world narrowed. I turned toward our SUV and felt his hand clamp onto my shoulder. Hard. Something metallic flashed in his other hand. A knife. He swung. I stumbled backward, falling onto the gravel as the blade cut through air where my neck had been a second earlier. Marla screamed. The man stepped over me like I wasn't even there and walked straight toward her door. I scrambled up, shouting for her to run, to get out the other side. She panicked, fumbled with her phone. Seatbelt tangled. I charged him from behind. We crashed to the pavement. The knife slid away under the car. He was stronger. Way stronger. In seconds, he had me pinned. Knee crushing my chest, hands wrapping around my throat. I couldn't breathe. Everything went gray. The last thing I saw was Marla finally breaking free and running into the darkness. Then the pressure vanished. He got up and ran after her. I lay there choking, lungs burning, throat screaming. When I could stand, the highway was empty. Too empty. I followed her path, calling her name. Found her shoe first. Then, her. She lay just beyond the shoulder, stars reflecting in her open eyes. I already knew. I still tried. I held her hand until help arrived. The man was caught weeks later. Convicted. Life sentence. None of it brought her back. Now I live alone in Maine, far from highways, far from open roads. I don't drive at night anymore. If someone flags you down on an empty road, don't stop.